Today I'm taking one jelly roll and turning it into 2 quilts at the same time. This is the project any quilter loves. Quick, easy and stunning, and we get to do it twice. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Here's what we're working here today. This very pretty blue jelly roll, and these fabrics are just stunning. And I love how you get a whole collection of fabric with just one jelly roll. If we were to buy yardage from each pattern, we'd spend a fortune. But with pre-cuts, you get a variety of fabrics that work very well together and are ready to use. There are 40 strips in this jelly roll and we need 10 groups of 4. So let's mix these up and create some lovely combinations for our quilt. Now, I'm aware there is a lot of blue here, but I am looking for the right contrast with this kind of monochromatic fabric mix. Plus, I will be adding 1 extra fabric to both quilts for some much needed contrast. And I don't mean to say that monochromatic quilts really do need a contrast. We've seen that's not the case, but with this one, a little bit of contrast will go a long way. And the fabric I'm using is a nice red. Mine is polka dotted, yours does not have to be. It can be a solid, as long as the contrast is there, you're good to go. And of course, you do not need to use a jelly roll for this project. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Most of my scraps are strips, so I use them a lot for these kinds of projects. You can do this using thinner strips as well. It doesn't have to be 2.5 inches. I'm just being really lazy today and making life easier for myself here. I am sewing my groups using a 1/4 inch foot, and we want to try and make these groups as similar in width as we possibly can, so they'll have all the same size. I don't think we realize how important this tiny detail is when we're quilting, until it's time to sew and the squares don't match and we're in a world of trouble. Okay, these are our groups and I am liking them already. The fabrics really do make the quilts. Next step is pressing our seams nice and flat before we proceed. And this is another big step that often gets overlooked. I used to not press at all or very little, and I couldn't understand why my tops would look wonky or uneven. Now I know better. If I'm sewing something I need to cut into later, I need it to be flat. And we're making squares with these. They really need to be as straight as they possibly can. This way, all we need to do is just measure the width of this big strip, and that's the same measurement we will use for our square length. So this is about 8.5 inches, so that's what we're cutting. And these strips are about 42 inches long, so we should get about 5 squares for each of these 10 groups. And this is what we got. Time to add our second fabric real quick. We need to measure half a square, and that's the size of the squares we need, so about 40-ish inches. Let's cut 2 red squares for every stripy square we've got here. So 100 of them. I may end up adding other red fabrics that will look really cute actually. I'm using red, but you can pick some white for these squares, or black, or any color that's completely different from the fabrics you're using. For me, there were a couple of light fabrics that I was afraid would be too similar for white, so I preferred to go bolder here. And I think this is going to look really nice. Now, before anything else, I need to make my puzzle, because we are adding 1 square to 2 opposite corners, and we're sewing on our outside diagonal lines, and I need to know which squares to add the right fabrics to. Both pieces need to match, so let's do that. And now that we know, time to add our reds. Next step is adding some line to our red squares. We need a middle line that marks the center of the square, and we need a second line on the outside of that line with a 1/2 inch distance between them. We need to make sure we sew this as straight as we can. The point here is by the time we're finished, we will have replaced these 2 corners with a red triangle. If they're too wonky, these won't look like squares at all. And have I ever told you about how I became a content creator in the first place? I was actually a blogger. You know, I love pets, so I decided to write and share my love for them. It did really well actually, but if I'm honest, it was such a nightmare to set up that website. Luckily, I found Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for building beautiful websites that work for you. You can create a personalized website, blog, portfolio, or online store, even if you have no clue where to begin. There are hundreds of design templates to choose from, and then you can customize it using the drag and drop website builder to fit your style and needs. Squarespace also has AI tools like Design Intelligence that allows you to pick every tiny detail of your website to fit your brand, and the Blueprint AI that basically builds a website for you. All you need to do is answer a few questions and it will go from a blank page to a website in minutes. You'll be able to do it all yourself, even if, like me, you have zero digital skills. Squarespace also has all the marketing tools you need to engage with your audience, connect with new people, and reach more customers. Squarespace Payments, for example, has all payments in one place without having to connect to a third party. So, if you're an author, an artist, or a small business owner, Squarespace has everything you need to make your online presence known. You can check all of this out for yourself with a free trial at squarespace.com or use the code SOEASY to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or a domain. There's a link in the description so you can get started today. Yeah, so I made a mistake. My brain was telling me one thing and my hands were doing a totally different one. And then when I realized what I had done, I totally panicked and ended up cutting between the two lines. And now I have like an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance instead of correcting my seams. So please, if you try to do this project, which I think you should because it will be totally awesome, do it this way and not the way I'll be doing it throughout the video, okay? It will still look gorgeous though, so let's keep going. We fold half the square over, we cut off the excess, and this is what we get. Then we press, and that's it. Our first block is done. Let's do it 49 more times. And this is all there is to it. A little bit of a repetition, but I don't mind. As long as the fabrics are beautiful, I am fine with it. If you enjoy quilting, you really have to learn how to appreciate the journey. Have fun with it and take enjoyment from as many steps as you can. For me, the only thing I really don't like, no matter what I try, is cutting fabric. It makes my back hurt, it's repetitive, it requires concentration, it's so boring. I love the free flow part where I'm looking at the fabrics, adding details without having to think too much about it. And guys, before we know it, we are done. Our quilt is filled with teeny tiny butterflies flying away in a beautiful blue sky. Perfect. Time to press and sew our first quilt, that is. And how cute is this? I am loving this result. This is the first time I'm making this one, even though I've had it living in my head for a while now. And if I'm honest, it is looking better than I had imagined. And how quick and easy has this been so far? And don't worry if you're not using the whole 50 squares, okay? I am pretty sure we can find something else to do with it. All we need to do now is press and our first quilt top will be ready to go. We could add a frame or more blocks if we had 2 jelly rolls instead of 1. You decide the size you want for your loop-sided butterfly quilt. Okay, our first quilt is done. It is time to finish our second quilt top. And for this one, we're using these leftover half square triangles we've got right here. Let's press them open to see what we're working with. And I love half square triangles. They are so versatile and actually a very usual leftover from a quilt. Guys, do not throw away your leftover half square triangles, okay? This is the biggest waste. For our baby quilt, we're keeping it really simple and I'm doing my favorite half square triangle pattern, which are pinwheels, of course. Let's add them quickly to our puzzle and before we know it, we are ready to sew. Now the second quilt won't be as large as the first because the blocks we're using are smaller, of course, but it's still a great size for a quilt. And considering we're making it out of leftovers and pretty much at the same time as the bigger quilt, I would say that's pretty cool. But you can add a frame or more half square triangles as you please. This is your quilt too. This is nice and sewn. Time to press this cutie nice and flat because I am ready for the big reveal. And here we have it. One gorgeous jelly roll, a simple basic sidekick fabric, and 2 wonderful quilts that were born in a jiffy. Which one is your favorite? Don't forget to tell me in a comment. I would love to know. Simple, quick, and a whole lot of fun as promised. As always, I had a blast. I hope you did too, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye bye.